Welcome to Art Happens, the divine mess of art history, presented by J2 Atelier. I'm James William Moore, and today we're stepping into the dramatic, shadow-filled world of the Baroque, where light meets darkness, and one woman refused to stay in the shadows. This is the story of Artemisia Gentileschi, the woman who fought back. In the 17th century Italy, women could be muses, models, or wives of painters, but rarely painters themselves. Artemisia Gentileschi, born in 1593 in Rome, refused to play any of those roles. Her father, Orazio Gentileschi, was a respected painter who absorbed the dramatic style of Caravaggio, Rome's rebel genius. He painted with light and shadow instead of line, and little Artemisia watched every stroke. While other girls learned embroidery, she was grinding pigments and stretching canvases in her father's studio. She learned the scent of linseed oil before perfume, the way light slanted through the workshop at dusk, the rhythm of brush on panel. Orazio saw her talent early. He let her copy his commissions and paint small devotional works to hone her hand. By 14, she was studying anatomy, a subject women were often banned from. Her father arranged for her to sketch from plaster casts and even dissect drawings of the human form to understand bone and muscle. Rome at the time pulsed with competition. Caravaggio's followers battled for patrons. Painters filled churches with theatrical visions of saints and sinners. And into that charged atmosphere stepped Artemisia, a teenage girl who painted with the same bold chiaroscuro as the masters. Her early works, like Susanna and the Elders, painted when she was just 17, already showed something different. Female figures that weren't passive ideals, but living, thinking beings. You can see her questioning gaze even then, a young artist aware that every stroke was both art and argument. But her greatest challenge wasn't talent or technique. It was survival. The daily negotiation of being a woman in a world that didn't believe she belonged at an easel. At 17, Artemisia Gentileschi's world collapsed. Her father had hired a painter, Agostino Tassi, to teach her perspective, a highly valued skill she couldn't learn in the traditional academics because she was a woman. He was older, experienced, trusted, a mentor. But that trust became a weapon. One afternoon in 1611, while she worked alone in her father's house, Tassi forced himself on her. She fought back. She screamed. She even attacked him with a knife, but he overpowered her. When it was over, he promised marriage, the only honor a woman in her position could hope for. But that promise was another lie. Instead of silence, Artemisia spoke. She told her father. She told the court. And in doing so, she did something nearly unthinkable for a woman of her time. She accused a man of violence. The trial lasted 7 months. 7 months of interrogation, gossip, and humiliation. She was forced to repeat her story again and again before male judges and church officials. They questioned her virtue, her dress, her tone of voice, as if pain needed to be polite to be believed. To test her honesty, they tortured her with the sabia. Cords wrapped around her fingers and tightened until the bones nearly broke. A cruel device meant to reveal liars through pain. As her bloody hands shook, she said only, "E vero, e vero, e vero." It's true, it's true, it's true. Agostino Tassi was found guilty, but like so many stories, justice ended on paper. He never served his sentence. And Artemisia, still only 18, was left to rebuild her life from fragments. The irony is bitter. The same hands they crushed to silence her became the hands that painted her defiance. Every brushstroke that followed, every powerful woman she would paint, carried that history. She didn't just survive. She transformed the violence done to her into vision, rewriting her story not in words, but in oil and light and fury. In 1612 or 1613, Artemisia Gentileschi painted what would become one of the most startling images of the Baroque era, Judith Slaying Holofernes. On the surface, it tells a familiar biblical story. Judith, a widow from Bethulia, saves her people by seducing and beheading the Assyrian general Holofernes. Dozens of male painters had tackled that same moment. Caravaggio, Rubens, Tintoretto. And they always softened it. Judith is elegant, almost hesitant. Holofernes, more surprised than afraid. But Artemisia's version, it's a rupture. The painting erupts in motion. In the dimly lit room, the figures are caught mid-act. Not before, not after, but during. Judith and her maid Abra lean their full weight into the killing. Judith's face is composed, a jaw tight, her gaze fixed. Abra's arms strain, holding the thrashing general down. Holofernes' body twists in futile resistance. The sheet beneath him blooms red. The light, that fierce Caravaggisti glow, slices across the scene from upper left to lower right, illuminating the women's sleeves of gold and blue, the flash of a sword, the stream of blood that arcs towards us. There's no ornamental grace here. Every brushstroke is muscle and consequence. You can almost hear the breath between them. Judith's focus, Abra's exertion, Holofernes' final gasp. This isn't divine intervention. It's female will. Artemisia used oil on canvas to stage her own reckoning. The same hands crushed in court now define power with anatomical precision. The flexed forearm, the locked wrists, the taut line of the shoulder. She gives her women the physical strength denied to her in life. Critics have long read the painting as vengeance, a symbolic retaliation against Agostino Tassi. But look closer, and it's more than revenge. It's reclamation. Artemisia transforms trauma into authorship, rage into mastery. To viewers in her time, the work was scandalous, too violent, too real, too female. To us, it is one of the most visceral acts of defiance ever placed on canvas, a declaration that truth and power can flow from the same hand. She painted not to shock, but to be heard. And in that moment, she was. You can almost hear her thinking, if they won't believe my words, they'll believe my paint. To viewers of her time, the work was shocking and impossible to ignore. Today, it stands as one of the most visceral acts of defiance ever put to canvas. After Rome, Artemisia left the whispers behind. She packed up her brushes, her courage, and what was left of her reputation, and headed north to Florence. Florence was the heartbeat of Renaissance humanism, still glowing from the shadows of the Medici. And there, at barely 20 years old, Artemisia did something no woman had ever done before. She was admitted to the Accademia de Disegno, the oldest art academy in Europe. Membership meant she could sign her own contracts, take on apprentices, and be paid directly, not through her father or husband. For the first time, her name stood alone. The Medici family quickly noticed. Cosimo II commissioned her, and the great scholar Galileo Galilei became both friend and correspondent. They wrote to one another about perspective in astronomy, how light moved through space, and how art might capture it. It was a meeting of minds across disciplines, science and art, each reaching for truth. In Florence, Artemisia's palette deepened. Her canvases glowed with warm golds and bruised shadows. She painted women not as background figures, but as protagonists, intelligent, decisive, unflinching. Susanna and the Elders turns a story of harassment into one of psychological realism. Her Cleopatra does not crumble. She chooses her own death with serenity, reclaiming control. In Judith returns again and again, each version calmer, wiser, more self-assured. It's as if Artemisia was painting not a single heroine, but the evolution of her own strength. Artemisia didn't ask for acceptance. She demanded space and filled it with brilliance. Her later years carried her across Italy to Venice, Naples, even London, where she worked beside her father on royal commissions. By then, she was no longer Orazio's daughter. She was Artemisia, a master in her own right, commanding patrons and prices equal to her male peers. After her death in the mid-1600s, her name dimmed in the art historical record, erased by the same bias she fought against in life. But art has a way of waiting. Centuries later, the rediscovery began. In the 20th century, feminist historians unearthed her letters, restored her canvases, and reclaimed her legacy. They saw what her contemporaries tried to ignore. A woman who turned survival into art and art into power. From Caravaggio's pupil to a modern icon, Artemisia's light bridges 500 years of women fighting to be seen and painting themselves into history. Centuries later, her art still confronts us, demanding we see the power in pain and the courage in creation. Artemisia Gentileschi didn't paint to please. She painted to survive, to speak, to stand her ground, and ours. Artemisia painted survival and made vengeance beautiful. Thanks for listening to Art Happens, the divine mess of art history, presented by J² Aterlier. I'm your host, James William Moore. Next time, we'll dive into another masterpiece and the chaos that made it unforgettable. And don't forget, if you're looking for a creative spark or want to hear the story behind an artist's creation in their own words, check out our sister podcast, Lattes and Art, where conversations brew as richly as the ideas behind the canvas.